Hi, I'm Femi Oke and you're in the stream. Today, defending oceans and marine wildlife, we're asked one environmental activist, how far should people go in protecting the planet? So Omar Badr is our guest digital producer right now. Malika Balawi is off on vacation.
Having a good time.
I love it when we have a controversial guest on the show. It means that we have a great conversation. Some people are going to be delighted that Captain Paul Watson is here. Some people are going to have a lot of criticism
Plenty
for him.
of outrage. It's actually very intense, but we also have tons of people who are actually very excited about the fact that we have him actually today.
Right, great.
Take a look at my screen here. We have Travis, who says, AJ Stream and Captain Paul Watson. I am a major fan of both of you. I can't wait to watch it. And we have Mandette here, who says, Captain Paul Watson is a true inspiration. He puts his life on the line for what he believes. If the oceans die, we die. You hear that, folks at home? We die. Those are our lives that are actually on the line here. So I know you want to be part of the conversation today. So be sure to tweet in using the hashtag AJStream so I can get to your tweets online.
He's not blushing quite yet, but maybe you can make him blush. We have him here live in the studio, the environmental activist, Captain Paul Watson. We don't have an ocean for you, but welcome to the stream, Paul.
Well, thank you.
So you'll hear more from you in just a moment. Also, we have our conversation that extends into our global stream community. Hanging out via Google+, we have Kirsten, Grantley and Whitney, and they're waiting and are ready to go with their questions for Paul, and you'll hear from them in just a moment. But for a little more about today's main guest, he's been called a pirate and an eco-terrorist by his critics, and by supporters, a champion of animal rights and a defender of the environment. For almost 4 decades, Captain Paul Watson has worked to stop the destruction of oceans and marine wildlife through the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. That's an organisation he founded back in 1977. Now, his fleet's direct action tactics toward Japanese vessels in the Southern Ocean have drawn both praise and controversy for preventing what they describe as the illegal killing of whales by Japan. So, Paul, going back about a month, the International Court of Justice said to Japan that their whaling in the Southern Oceans was illegal and had to be stopped. Were you doing a happy dance that day? What was your reaction?
My reaction is that I know that the Japanese will not stop, despite what the International Court of Justice says. And in fact, just yesterday, they filed papers in a Seattle court asking for a permanent injunction against us intervening against their whale hunt. Why would they ask for an injunction if the Japanese government says they're going to stop? But unfortunately, when it comes to issues like fisheries and whales, the Japanese government has a history of duplicity, saying one thing and doing another. So we're preparing to go back to the Southern Ocean.
So if your name is mentioned in Japan, how do people react to you?
Well, we have supporters in Japan, but we also have a lot of critics. But we pretty much have supporters and critics all over the world.
Sure.
But I'm not really too concerned about the critics because my clients are whales and sharks and fish and turtles. That's who I represent, so I really don't care what people say about what we do, as long as we stay within the boundaries of our rules of engagement, is that we have never injured anybody, we don't intend to ever injure anybody, we stay within the boundaries of the law. But we do aggressive interventions.
Omar.
So we have some people actually in the community who are asking, we have Terry here actually who just tweeted in saying, there are enforcement bodies out there that do their jobs. The UN stopped the Japanese whaling, not Captain Paul Watson. He has captain in quotes. I know you're skeptical of the idea that this could actually stop the whaling, but what do you think of this idea that you're dealing with issues that are so big that it really should be up to these major international organizations to be handling as opposed to your group?
In 2005, nobody was even aware of Southern Ocean whaling. Because we went down there and we intervened and dramatized it, they became aware of it, especially in Japan. So we kept this in the forefront of the media. We kept it, the governments were constantly prodding them. We pushed the Australian government. The Australian government took Japan to court. So we were very much part of it. But during that entire time, we saved 6,000 whales from being killed, which would have otherwise been killed.
How do you do that? How do you save 6,000 whales?
We blocked their operations. So this year they took only 24% of their quota, last year 10% only. So we prevent them from loading dead whales. If they can't load a dead whale, they can't kill any more. So what we do is we physically block the stern slipways of the factory ship to prevent their operations.
Wow, so they can't even get out there.
Well, they can't maneuver to unload a whale, and so we just blocked that. In 2008, they challenged us on that. We didn't move. It resulted in 3 collisions, so they never tried it again.
Right, Omar.
Kirsten, I know we have actually Kirsten with us, who's the director of Planet Ocean. It's an NGO in Peru. I know you want to be part of this conversation. Why don't you jump in?
Sure. Good afternoon to both of you. Good afternoon, Captain Watson. I have a really pressing question, and it's basically, we work in Peru promoting dialogue and promoting consensus between government officials and between the community. So have you ever worked with organizations that also work on that path, or maybe have your approach complement other organizations that are also promoting more of a dialogue? Has that ever been an experience within Sea Shepherd?
Unfortunately, I couldn't really hear exactly.
Have you ever partnered up with other organizations?
Oh yes, we've partnered with many organizations. The Green Party, for instance, in Australia, we've been partnered with. We've worked with Wild Aid in the Galapagos. Right now, we're partnered with the governments of Senegal, Liberia, Ecuador, and Guatemala. So we're working with rangers and police officers.
My question, Captain Watson, is if you've ever partnered with organizations that promote dialogue more than having an aggressive activist approach.
So you're doing the activism as Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, and maybe the partner might not be quite as aggressive with their tactics as you are. Have you ever done that?
Well, right now we're partnered up with many groups for our Vortex project.
Right.
Pharrell Williams is actually part of that. G-Star Jeans, Evian Water, they're all part of this. And what this is to find a way to extract plastic from our oceans. There's 700 million tons of this stuff in the ocean. It's killing vast numbers of birds and fish every year. So we're working on the technology, trying to develop the technology to extract that plastic and recycle it.
Sure. I'm actually looking at some of the pictures here from Project Vortex. Tell us a little bit more about it as I scroll through so we can see what we're talking about here.
We're trying to find an economic solution to the problem of plastic pollution, and one approach is to recycle that plastic into clothing. And so Pharrell Williams owns a company called Bionic Yarn, and they make yarn out of plastic. And you can actually make almost, it looks just like fur in many cases, and sometimes just like jeans, denim you can make out of it.
Wow.
And so we're trying to find a way so that we can clean up the ocean and make the project pay for itself.
Right. See, I've seen, is it the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is all this, only on video, I haven't seen it in real life. What have you seen out on the ocean?
Well, the problem is you can't really see it because it's beneath the surface, but it's there. I mean, in the Pacific's about the size of Texas, but there's about 6 of these gyres around the world.
The size of Texas?
Yes,
that's
and the plastic breaks down into these revolving currents.
Right.
And it just stays there. And unfortunately, it breaks down into little particles, and those particles are ingested by fish and by birds, and of course it kills them. So it's actually more of a source of...
about that. Sorry for interrupting, but talking about that, what would you say is the most impressive thing that you've seen throughout your whole experience in your whole life working in the ocean? Like, what is the most shocking image that you have to mind today?
The most shocking things that I've seen out there, I think the Canadian seal hunt probably ranks up in there with the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of baby seals. The slaughter of the dolphins in Japan, you know, where they drive them in and just wipe out entire families. The killing of pilot whales in the Danish Faroe Islands. These are brutal and completely unnecessary things. We don't seem to understand the relationship between prey and predator and different species in the ocean. In eastern Canada, they want to reduce or wipe out, in many cases, seal populations, because they say they're a threat to the fish. But when Europeans first came over, there were 45 million seals and no shortage of fish, because there's a relationship between prey and predator, which we've disrupted and everything. The fish and the seals get along just fine. In fact, we feed more fish to our domestic house cats than all of the seals in the world eat. So if you want to save fish, stop feeding fish to your cats and let the seals have them.
All right.
We have a video comment actually here that just came in. Take a listen to this.
Hi, my name is Alithia Alnakok-Burrell. I'm an Inuit filmmaker from Nunavut in the Canadian Arctic. Inuit are facing massive pressures with mining and offshore oil drilling that would affect calving grounds for caribou, beluga, and narwhal. I would like to know how Paul Watson justifies spending so much time and money fighting the sustainable hunting of animals that are not endangered when we're facing actual threats to one of the most sensitive ecosystems on the planet. Thank you.
Do you feel like there are bigger issues that you should be dealing with?
I haven't spent a penny fighting sustainable hunting. We oppose the commercial seal hunt of Canada, not the Inuit seal hunt. But the Canadian government has brought the Inuit in and partnered them up with the commercial sealers. That's their choice. But nobody has intervened against Inuit hunting. But
are you comfortable with native hunting of things like
as long
seals
as it's
and
legal,
whales?
as long as it's legal.
Right.
And if Sea Shepherd only intervenes against illegal activities.
Sure.
And what Canada is doing in sorry.
Sorry, that's a great point, Captain Watson, that you only intervene in things that are legal. With respect to whales, again, in the Southern Ocean, do you think this decision by the International Court of Justice might actually be providing Japan just a loophole that they need? Now they have a clear path to develop a new scientific whaling program that will be legal in the eyes of the highest court in the world. Is that something that concerns you? Is this a decision that conservationists like me are getting too excited about?
The highest court in the world has ruled that what they're doing is illegal. You can't do this posturing as scientific whaling, and when it's really commercial whaling. They will come back and they'll try and engineer a new so-called scientific research project, but they have to kill 600 whales just to break even on this. And if they go by what the International Court of Justice is saying, they're going to have to vastly reduce that to a couple of hundred. That's not in their economic interest. So if they return, I don't really actually understand how they're going to do it unless they do it in complete defiance of the International Court of Justice. But you know, for 12 years, we've been called the outlaws and the pirates and the eco-terrorists. The International Court of Justice in The Hague has decided that it is the Japanese whalers who are the outlaws, not us. We are simply upholding international conservation law.
I'm listening to you. I hear passion. I hear this incredible connection to the ocean. Why are you so connected to the ocean?
Well, I was raised by the ocean, but I'll tell you, in 1975, we went out on the very first Greenpeace campaign to protect whales from the Soviet fleet, and we found them 60 miles off the coast of California. And we put ourselves between the whales and the whalers. We were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we felt that was going to work. Right. And they fired harpoons over our head.
But Paul, slow down a moment, because I was 10 in 1977, so I really want to be able to picture what that was like. So describe what it was like to have a harpoon shot across your head.
Well, we were in a very small rubber boat, and behind us was a 150-foot steel harpoon vessel bearing down on us at 20 knots through very rough seas. And in front of us were these 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time we tried to block the harpoon, you know, he would stop. But then the captain of the Soviet vessel came down the catwalk. Yeah. He screamed into the ear of the harpooner, and then he turned to us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, that harpoon went over our head, slammed into the backside of a female. She screamed. There was a fountain of blood. She rolled on her side, and the largest whale in that pod, the male, dove, hit the water with his tail, and disappeared. He swam straight underneath of us and threw himself at the harpooner on the bow to protect his pod. They were waiting for him. They fired another pod into another harpoon, and he rolled back in agonizing pain, rolling on the surface, blood everywhere, and I caught his eye. And he came towards us underwater. I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming real fast. He came up and out of the water at an angle so that he was going to fall on top of us and crush us. And as his eye rose up out of the water, and I looked into it, I could even see my own reflection in that eye. Right. I saw understanding. He understood what we were trying to do, because I could see him make the move to pull himself back, and he began to slide back into the water. His eye disappeared beneath the waves, and he died. He could have killed us and chose not to do so. But I also saw something else, pity, not for himself, but for us, that we could take life so thoughtlessly and ruthlessly. And for what? What were the Russians killing those whales for? Primarily for spermaceti oil, and one of the things they were using it for was to make intercontinental ballistic missiles, lubricating oil for those missiles. So here we were, destroying one of the most beautiful, intelligent, socially complex creatures on the planet for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me, we're insane. And from that moment on, I dedicated myself to protecting them. They're my clients, not people.
All right, hold on, hang out for just a moment. There's just something I want to check in with Paul, and then Omar, and then we'll come back to you and hang out. If you'd been killed that day, would it have been worth it?
Well, I guess I wouldn't be here to really contemplate that. But the fact is,
I suppose the question is it worth your life trying to save whales?
I ask every crew member who comes on board, are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? And if they say no, we don't want them. And when people say that's asking a lot of people, I said, no. We ask young people to risk their life all the time for real estate and oil wells, and we think that's perfectly okay. Right. I think to protect an endangered species is a far more noble pursuit.
Wow.
Yep. We actually have a lot of people who are commenting on the tactics that you actually use in your efforts. We have somebody who's a critic, name is Peace with Fairness, who says, to intimidate residents in Taiji, that's in Japan, this is not just tactics. Captain Paul Watson is a coward fugitive who bullies the weak. On the other hand, we have Lubna, who actually says, there is no problem with the tactics that are employed. Take a look around us. The world is going to hell. Direct action is needed to slow it down and bring us back. Now, I know we also have Whitney, who is an environmental policy master's candidate in our hangout. Why don't you jump in?
On that note, Captain Watson, I'd really like to ask you, I know you do all of these direct action activities with whales and these large marine mammals, but what is some of the other work that you do that is perhaps focused on other species? We get a lot of attention to these large, charismatic marine mammals, but what else do you do that you'd kind of like to talk about?
Well, we do have projects protecting everything from sea cucumbers to plankton, but they don't make for good television, but we still do them. We stopped ocean dumping of iron. They were doing dumping of iron off of the Galapagos to try and artificially stimulate algae blooms, which without any scientific study at all, we stopped that off of the Galapagos. We've been going after poachers, taking everything from oysters to lobsters to sea cucumbers in places all over the world, taking them into court. We've been protecting sharks. Now they're really difficult to protect because everybody hates sharks, even though the average number of people killed by sharks every year is 5, but we kill 75 million of them. So in fact, your chances of getting killed on a golf course playing golf are much greater than swimming with a shark, because more people are killed by lightning on golf courses. But we tend to demonize these animals. So we're involved with all of these creatures.
Can I ask you, do you believe that direct action methods could be effective with a species, with sharks, for example, a species that is not so attractive to the masses, perhaps, or does it have to be more popular family animals?
One at a time, hang out. I know we've got Captain Paul Watson here, but we're going to take one at a time. So
just quickly to answer that, we actually are doing activism with sharks. Right now, we're following the shark killing boats off of Western Australia. When they release these the sharks under 3 meters, they usually die, but they're not supposed to kill them. Our guys jump into the water, swim with the sharks until they can get enough oxygen into their bodies to survive. So we have some video of 2 young women who are swimming with a 3-meter shark through the water, pushing it for an hour so that it can revive it. Sure. That's on an individual level. But so we do direct activism on all of these issues, but we do it in a manner that we don't cause anybody any injury, and we never have. We try to incorporate humor into our campaigns. That's why I use stink bombs and things. But one thing you have to keep in mind, we use the most powerful weapon that's ever been invented, and that's the camera. And that is our main weapon.
All right, Kirsten, hold tight for a moment. Just take a breath. I'm going to share with our audience who might not be in the States, who might not have seen Animal Planet's Whale Wars series. They have to watch this. Tell us about Whale Wars.
Well, I went to all the different networks and said, you got a show right now. It's got big ratings called The Deadliest Catch. It's about a bunch of guys going into some remote area water and catching crabs. Right. I'll give you men and women going into a much more remote area to save whales. It's got to be more compelling than catching crabs every week. So Animal Planet went for it. All
right, I'm going to show some direct action tactics so people can see exactly what you're talking about. Have a look at this.
They threatened to fire on us if we come any closer. We'll call their bluff.
This is the Stop your obstructive actions immediately. Should you dare to board this vessel, you'll be taken into custody and restrained as illegal intruders. Incoming!
Wow, that is really physical.
Yeah, we throw rotten butter bombs and they throw concussion grenades.
Right. Do you sit down and plan a whale hunt, whale tracking? Do you work out, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this? How do you strategize?
Well, we do make plans, but at the same time, we change and evolve as and respond to what the whalers are doing. Keep in mind, this is called the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. You don't kill whales in a whale sanctuary. I don't know why that's so difficult for people to understand. That's why we're there.
I know Grantley, actually, from the Hangout, who's a marine conservationist, wanted to jump in. Grantley, go ahead.
That's right. Yeah, Captain Watson, that's clear that your tactics make for great TV, and they do an excellent job of saving individual whales, of broadcasting this to a broader audience, getting those of us in the most developed world to think about this again. We maybe forgot about it for half a generation, but do you think those sorts of tactics get in the way of official policy dialogue and diplomacy? It's admittedly slow, but for people like me, for example, that work on these sorts of issues, wearing business suits instead of wetsuits, do your tactics get in our way, or do they help? Are they a piece of the same puzzle?
You know, we have all of the rules and the regulations and the treaties to protect our oceans. The problem is we don't have enforcement. There's a lack of political and economic will to enforce these laws. And we're not going to sit by and just watch it all go to hell while everybody sits and goes to meetings and signs papers. I mean, I attended the United Nations conference in 1992, and everybody made all sorts of great plans, none of which they've carried out. Politicians are really good at saying, oh, you know, drafting up papers and doing this, but they don't carry them out. We're actually working with the people who do enforcement, the rangers of Senegal, the park rangers of the Galapagos. So we are making a difference on that level. But when it comes to dealing with all of these meetings and everything, you know, I don't see anything ever coming out of them. I attended the United Nations Conference on the Environment in 1972 when they said the greatest single problem was out of control human population growth. And by 1992, they didn't even talk about it anymore. So all they do is talk.
Well, with respect to whales specifically, how do you answer the critics that say if we would just stop talking about it, if you would stop televising it, the Japanese would quit whaling? They're ready to quit, but they're not going to when they have this strong opponent in the media at which they aim all of their nationalistic pride. And that might be wrong.
Are you
frankly,
saying?
But how do you answer?
Are you saying that the entire nation of Japan is going to be concerned about what one non-government organization has to say? I mean, they do treat us like we're a nation that we're at war with, but really, that's just silly. I mean, they should stop on their own accord.
To people watching this, Captain Paul Watson, and they may well be inspired by you, you inspire a lot of people. If they want to join your crew, if they want to do something about ocean conservation, what would you tell them?
They can come to our website and get a crew application. And we have people from all over the world. The last campaign to the Southern Ocean was 100 crew from 24 different nations.
What do you look for? What's the ideal crew member for you?
3 things: courage, passion, and imagination. And I think that you can change everything. People say, you know, your crew are not professionals, they're amateurs. But I go back to 1910 when the London Times criticized Ernest Shackleton for not having a professional crew. He said, don't give me professionals, I want people with passion. They'll get the job done. And that's my crew, are passionate individuals.
So there are a lot of people who are actually are interested in everything that you're interested in and are just as passionate about it, but they're concerned about the future of activism on this issue. We have Travis here who says, with apathy at its high levels, 40% voter turnout in many places in Canada, and collectivism seemingly replacing activism, are you nervous about the future of eco-warriors?
Well, yes. I mean, for instance, the Sierra Club just had their election. Only 7% of their members voted, and yet they're considered, you know, they're supposed to be conservationists. Apathy is a major problem. But, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is to show that individuals can make a difference, small groups can make a difference, and as long as they stay within the boundaries of the law and of nonviolence. But, you know, here's the thing. I do not know of a single case of anybody being murdered by a conservationist or environmental activist. But in the last 10 years, 908 environmental activists have been murdered.
It's interesting. We were in an editorial meeting just the other day. We were talking about this as an entire program to do because the numbers are so high for that.
And nobody's even aware of it, unless it's some celebrity environmentalist like Diane Fossey, or in fact the chief warden of Virunga National Park was shot 2 days ago.
Yeah. I mean, you are a celebrity environmentalist conservationist. Are you comfortable with that?
I guess. I mean, I've got to die sometime, but I've actually managed to reach the age of 63. I'm doing okay.
And you're not retiring yet, are you?
No, I don't intend to retire.
All right. He's Captain Paul Watson. If you've enjoyed this conversation, you should go to stream.aljazeera.com. We have a post show. Our hangout is coming. We have more from our online community, and Captain Paul Watson will share more of his experience as an oceanic and also a conservationist and a marine conservationist as well. Just have time to tell you about the next show. Gear change for this one. To cut or not to cut? Why some doctors say that a man's foreskin has to go. Interesting subject, right, Omar?
Very interesting. You know, it seems like an awkward personal conversation, but it's also a public health issue, so it's pretty important.
Absolutely. So we will be having that conversation on Monday. I know you'll be watching. Our post show is at stream.aljazeera.com. Until then, see you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We're talking about environmental activism and the state of the oceans with Captain Paul Watson. Let's get right back to the conversation. In the sort of 10-15 seconds between the main show and the post show, Paul said to me, well, the questions weren't that tough. What were you expecting, Paul?
I don't know, I never really seemed to get really tough questions, because I think that, well, first of all, I don't really care.
That might be why you don't think they're tough, because you don't care.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. Omar.
We actually have a video comment that came in from Michael Hopper here in Washington, D.C. Listen to this.
Hi, Captain Watson.
Hi.
Don't mind the whales back here. They're harmless. My question for you is about your tactics. I'm wondering if you think your confrontational approach is alienating the very people whose support you'll need to make any real change in cultures that allow for whaling.
I know we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but are you ever concerned that maybe there are ways that you can reach out to certain cultures where they're comfortable with whaling, and whether you might be misconstrued essentially, or what you're trying to actually achieve?
I'm quite open for anybody to come up with ideas to do that, but I haven't seen anything very much. The only time we've ever actually confronted an indigenous whaling operation was with the Macao whale hunt in Washington State. And not many people realize this, but we were actually invited in by elders of the Macao who were opposed to this killing because they said it was not part of their culture. Mm-hmm. In fact, Alberta Thompson, who was a 76-year-old elder at the time, she's since died, but she said, well, this isn't part of our culture. These guys want to blow a whale apart with an anti-tank gun. This is not part of our culture. And she said, going up into the mountains and weaving baskets and picking berries is part of our culture. Learning our language is part of our culture, but they don't want to learn that. So when you reduce the culture thing to some sort of big game hunt, that's not part of the culture. And joining us on that campaign were the Haida and the Kwagyut, and the Haida actually had a very good insight about it. They said, we used to kill the macaw for killing whales because we used to believe that our warriors' spirit went into the whales, and they were killing our warriors. Let me just finish this. So they say if they have that part of their culture, then we should be able to kill them. Of course, we're not going to accept that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, I think there's an immersion of a new cultural paradigm in a lot of places where there's a nature's rights movement that is coming to light. We've got a river in New Zealand that's been given rights. There's movements to give rights or personhood to primates and for example, chimpanzees. Do you think that dolphins and whales should have rights or personhoods perhaps equal to a human being? And do you think those rights should also be given to other species, or is there something that distinguishes whales and dolphins, cetaceans, from other species?
I think that whales and dolphins, mountain gorillas and elephants all should have rights. I think to kill them is murder. And but our organization, like I said, is dedicated to intervening against illegal activities. But philosophically, yes, I think they should all have rights. Whales have bigger brains and more complex brains than we do. We equate intelligence with the use of tools, but we don't know how to deal with non-manipulative intelligences like whales and dolphins and elephants. But my own experience with these various species is that they're highly intelligent, and I mean, if it's like an extraterrestrial species came here and they just started exploiting us for meat, and they would just probably think, well, that's normal, and we would, of course, be upset. But from my own experiences with these animals, including elephants, I spent 6 months working with elephants in East Africa, is that they're highly intelligent creatures.
How do you go from ocean to elephants?
Well, in 1978, I worked on a project to track down elephant poachers in East Africa, and I learned a lot from that.
Sure.
And but at one point, I had to come to the point and say, I can't cover everything, so I'm going to cover the oceans. I can't cover land and oceans.
Right.
And everything.
Okay.
But what I learned there was very, very good.
All right, hang out, hold tight. Just take a pause for a moment. Omar's going to jump in
here. We just actually have another tweet from Travis here, who's talking about the question of the title of terrorist. He says it's easy for government propaganda to make someone a terrorist, but Captain Paul Watson won't be a terrorist when he wins. And we've seen this before in other issues like Nelson Mandela in South Africa. How close are we, do you think, to reaching the point to where people sort of understand the importance of this cause?
Are you equating Paul with Nelson Mandela?
Pretty close. I mean, not quite.
Well, I have to say with Nelson Mandela, he was a great inspiration to me. I wrote an article about him in 1972, and I couldn't get it published anywhere except for the alternative newspapers. Why? Because the man was a terrorist. And in 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unimaginable. It was impossible. And yet he proved to us that the impossible can become possible.
Right. I think it was Kirsten. Did you have another thing? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Captain Watson. So you were talking a while ago about sharks. So what do you think about extractive activity, for example, of sharks, which isn't sustainable and which in most cases, such as in Peru, should have an activist approach in order to assure that these fisheries are sustainable.
So, Kirsten, I'm going to ask you, Kirsten, it's quite hard to hear you. Kirsten, stop talking for a second. Kirsten, this is Femi. Stop talking for a second. It's only because we can't hear your audio very well. Say a very simple question, one sentence.
Okay. How do you combine activism in resources that a lot of livelihoods depend on, for example, in the shark fishery?
All right, great, thank you.
A lot of livelihoods depended on a lot of things like slavery and other things too. You got to make changes to live in this world, and you cannot destroy the planet for the livelihood of any group of people.
I'm looking at Interpol here on my laptop. Grantley, just give me a moment. Interpol are looking for you right now.
Well, that's what they say, but I'm the only person in history, I think, who's been put on the Interpol red list for the crime of trespassing.
Okay.
And that's only because of Japanese pressure.
All right.
And in fact, I didn't even trespass. It's conspiracy to trespass because they made a plea bargain with the man who did board a Japanese vessel after the vessel had cut his boat in half. And they said that they would let him go if he accused me of ordering him to do, even though I'm on Whale Wars advising him not to do it. So it's all a trumped up charge, but Japan has the power to do that. But as you can see, I'm here in your studio and I'm not under arrest.
How many times have you been in prison?
I've never been convicted of a crime ever.
Okay.
But I've been in jail a few times.
Yeah.
But again, anybody who's an activist is, I think it was Abby Hoffman says, I don't trust anybody who's never been in jail.
All right, okay. Omar.
We have actually another tweet that came in asking, what in your opinion is the most urgent defilement of the planet next after to the Southern Ocean Campaign?
Well, I think that the absolute most important thing is to protect our oceans. If the oceans die, we die. And we're destroying our oceans. We're destroying life in our oceans. 80% of our oxygen supply comes from the sea. And you know what's happening in the pirates in Somalia. Why are there pirates in Somalia? Because the Asian and European fishing fleets looted everything and took it away and turned those people into pirates. That's what's going to happen in Mauritania and Senegal and Liberia unless we stop those poachers. 2 months ago, the Senegalese took a Russian trawler and grabbed it and pulled it in. They had not done that before. Putin was very upset. He had to pay €750,000 fine. But finally, they're cracking down on these people. They're the real pirates. The real pirates are the people who are raping our oceans.
I know Grantley wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Captain Watson, that I really agree with almost everything you're saying here. You know, I know I had a little pushback earlier, but I agree with almost everything you're saying. But then you compare shark fishermen to slave owners, and
Yes.
that's why people struggle carrying your message in other communities. I mean, these are not slaveholders; these are good people.
No, they're wiping out. They're wiping out a species.
Fish for sharks by their parents, and they do that, and it's wrong. And I completely agree that shark fishing is unsustainable. But they're not slaveholders.
I've read histories of where slaveholders were good people. They were just going about their business.
But you're doing it again. These are
I am.
not
They are just
slaveholders.
as bad. They are just as bad. If you're wiping out a species on this planet, you are just as bad. That is a crime against humanity.
So this debate right there is where you're different from other people. You feel that what's happening in the oceans is so critical and other people aren't on board. How do you get that mindset to change?
Well, when things start changing, I guess I'll have to get on board. There's 3 basic laws of ecology.
Right.
The law of diversity. The strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The law of interdependence. All of those species are interdependent with each other. The law of finite resources, that there's a limit to carrying capacity. Any species that does not live in accordance with those 3 laws will go extinct. And we're right on course for doing that. I got in trouble a few years ago because I said worms are more important than people. Everybody got all upset about that. And, you know, Fox Network went ballistic on it. And they said, well, how could you say such an outrageous thing that worms are more important than people? I said it because worms are more important than people. Because worms can live on the earth without us, but we cannot live without them. Fish can live without us, but we cannot live with them. Trees, the same. We need them. They don't need us, so they're more important than we are.
When is the next time that you're sailing?
Well, our vessels are out at sea all the time right now.
Right.
We have 2 vessels operating off of Senegal. We just finished patrols in Guatemala. Our 3 big vessels have just returned for the Southern Ocean, and we have another vessel that's deployed doing the Vortex project out of Hawaii.
Are you still going out to sea yourself?
I will be going out to sea. I was on the campaign before in Antarctica, but I haven't for a while. But I've got some good captains and good officers, and I've reached the point where I really like it, the fact that there are so many people who can carry on this that I don't even have to be involved if I don't want to. But and everybody's equal. I mean, for instance, Lamy, who's president of Sea Shepherd in France, is one of our most dynamic. She's been leading campaigns. She's leading a campaign to the Faroes this summer. She led our tuna campaigns in the Mediterranean. There's we have people all over the world who have taken that up, and I encourage that. Leadership should be organic, and it should be encouraged, and the more people that we have in those leadership positions, the more we'll get done.
You are so easy. Hang out. I'm calling. No, Kirsten, no, absolutely not. I'm wrapping up. There are no additional questions, but you can take it online, because I know that Captain Paul Watson is online, and so is the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. So hang out. Your time is up, and I'm just going to wrap up with Paul. I know they're like, what? We have 1,000 more questions. No, you don't. There's one thing I wanted to check in with you, and that is about how distinctive you are. When you walk down the street, people know who you are. So, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Well, sometimes it can be a bad thing. We were doing undercover work in Namibia, and I was in a restaurant, tiny little restaurant in the middle of nowhere, and I had to sign an autograph when people weren't supposed to know I was even in the country. So that's a little inconvenient. But what I really enjoy is all the young people that come up and want to get involved, and there's so many of them, and especially kids. And people ask me, what can we teach our children? Right. And my answer to that is nothing. Listen to them. They know what's going on. Ooh. They understand it. They have an intuitive understanding of it. Encourage that. Sure. And let them go with their imagination. Wow.
Okay. We reluctantly have to leave it there. I know the Hangout have more things to ask you. I know Omar's got more from the community, but I'm going to call time on this conversation. Captain Paul Watson, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you also to Kirsten Fosberg, Grant Lee Galland, and Whitney Hoops as well. Loved your questions, loved your energy. Meanwhile, on Monday, what will we be doing? Well, to cut or not to cut? Why some doctors say a man's foreskin has to go. And you won't believe that Captain Paul Watson has a take on that. You have to tweet me to find out what it is. I know. Thanks for watching. See you next time.